Got
I lost him.
technology.
Yeah.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, we could hear you.
Oh,
Hold on.
right. Woo, woo.
Hold on.
Okay. All right, we got it. Nancy, so let me, I'd like to open this, Ocean Island Port Authority special meeting for Monday, August 23rd at 1 o'clock. Call to order. Invocation of pledge of allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for our many blessings. We thank you for this great country that we live in. We pray, Lord, that you would watch over our first responders and our servicemen and women, keep them in a safe way, and give us wisdom and discernment in all that we do today. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. And join me in the pledge of allegiance to the flag of our country.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Forgive me, sorry. Commissioner Hill? Commissioner Hannah?
Here.
Commissioner Hannah?
Here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Franklin? Vice Chairman Cole?
Here.
Chairman Fullwood?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, I've got public comment. Chief Baker's here, but I think maybe, I don't know if you both want to talk or not, Commissioner, Mr. Ross.
Sure, I just have one question. I've handed it out to everybody. You can explain why there's a difference between the two sets of books.
He says, please explain why the insurance premiums paid by Opioid's behalf by Worldwide are reflected in Worldwide's audited statement for the fiscal years 2018, 2019, 2020 as a receivable, but not indicated on Opioid's audited statements for the same years. Okay, we will either respond to that by email or we will give you an answer by the next meeting. That's all I can tell you right now. I could not answer that question.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay, very good. Moving on. Okay, we're gonna talk first. Let's go down. I'm gonna rearrange things here. Reynolds Smith, well, let's talk about the budget first. Because we may have to do that before we do Reynolds Smith and deal. All right, let's talk about the budget. Everybody should have a copy of the budget that was submitted.
Version 3.
Version 3, proposed version 3. Okay, go ahead, Pierre.
So it's ready to approve essentially. I mean, there's a few slight changes, but just as we get down to the nitty gritty. So right now, the cost of living increase is running at 5.4%. So rather this budget includes it includes only 4%. So that would increase the income by $3,000. And then we received the insurance bill, which is down in the port operations part, which is $12,065. So we'll be updating the budget to reflect that. But there's no other changes as far as anyone's informed me at this point. So unless anyone has any comments or discussions, as we talked about, we have enough money in the reserves right now to meet our obligations this year for the budget that we approved for the current year and to fund this budget, including the fixed fee, obviously, from the operator and Customs House, which is an outgoing expense only. So we have enough money currently to fund this budget as it is. At this point, this is what we know is factual, obviously, and it's ready to go. So.
Okay. All right, who wants to start off the conversation?
Sure, I'll start since, okay, so I have a question about the pilot payment that's shown as a 0, but should we list something, and maybe it's a question for Patrick, if we expect that we may be paying something, you know, in a settlement, do we need to list that, or how do we budget for like an ongoing settlement?
I don't know that you could budget for it right now. You don't have any idea what it's gonna be.
So if I could, so obviously the 2 pilot payment, the 50,000 for the last 2 years remaining that we, or the consensus of the board, or whatever you want to call it, the negotiating position has been, are accrued and in the financial statement. So there's $100,000. There's $100,000 payable and receivable in the audited financial statements. Remember, this is, so those items were expensed in 2018 and 19 and accrued, obviously, and put into payable. So they sit in your payables right now. Obviously, this does not reflect payables. This would say, if we put 50,000 in here, that says that we're going to pay 50,000 for the current year. In other words, we're accruing an additional amount to go above the $100,000 that we have sitting in our financials today.
Did we receive the $100,000 for those?
No, we have a payable and we have a receivable of $100,000 sitting on our books on the audited financial statements. And in the quarterlies that you review also for the $100,000 to be paid from Worldwide and the $100,000 to be paid out to the city.
So we haven't received the $100,000.
Correct.
Why?
I think at that point, it was decided that because we were in litigation with the city, that we didn't need the money. Also, all the money would do was sit in our account. Obviously, if we spend that money, as we are right now, potentially going to, you know, kind of, if we continue with the legal fees, if we spend that money, there's nowhere else for us to get it. So until we actually need to pay that out, do we need the money sitting in our bank account?
But I thought those 2 years were not disputed because that was the last 2
And
years. I didn't think
they're-
were disputed.
They're not disputed.
So why haven't they been paid?
We're in litigation with them right now about paying anything.
I-
Is that right? Yes. So we're really not even supposed to be talking about it.
I thought that the last 2 years were not in dispute. Or
Not true.
filings.
Not true.
No, I don't think so. I think the pilot payments are in dispute.
Yes.
But the last 2 years that were due
No.
operating agreement,
No. We were in mediation. We gave them an option about what to do, what we could do. And they refused the option, so they sued us. We're in litigation, so we're not even supposed to be talking about it.
Stop the discussion.
so I just am curious why we didn't receive the payment from Worldwide.
We didn't pay it, and until we pay it, we don't ask them to pay us back. That's the way that works. We pay it, and then we ask them to pay us back, and they've always done it.
So historically, what had happened is we accrue that for the calendar year, right? So the last accrual was in 2019. That payment is not made until July 2020 during the city's budget or whatever year starts, or I'm not sure why, but anyway, the payment was made in July of 2020 of the following year. We did not receive the payment until July of the year. We did not collect the payment as we went along. And so because we haven't made the payment to the city, we have not requested the funds from Worldwide.
So it's on a reimbursement basis. I thought it was an obligation of Worldwide of the operating agreement to pay that money directly to us.
Not until we bill them for it.
And we haven't invoiced them for it.
No, because we haven't paid it. And that's what the lawsuit's all about.
Okay, and then my second question was about us working the way down the budget. I know we brought up additional revenues for the CPI quarterly, which would be in the quarterly fee. And then miscellaneous income, would that include additional revenues Is that where that would go?
The miscellaneous income is a $2,000 bond fee that we receive for being the bond conduit per year. That's the miscellaneous income.
Okay, I think we should have another line for additional revenues because it keeps coming up, even if it shows 0. If we keep discussing it at the meetings and it's clear that we think there are additional revenues for labor thing, for other activities, or that are not included in that quarterly fee. So I think it makes sense for that to be listed as a line item, even if we are still working on what that figure actually is.
It's in the books. It's in the financial books. We just don't put it on there. Cheaper, we can add it.
If I'm gonna add it, that's fine.
And then down to the commission direct for the salaries, again, I think we should pass a budget which reflects the salary that is supported by our quarterly fee, the ongoing operation report, as opposed to funding it either out of one-time payments from the state or what are they calling it now? I'm losing track of all the different grant acronyms, but the COVID relief funding of $800,000 is a one-time relief payment. I know it can cover salaries. I know that the conduit bond issuance supported these salaries in the past. Again, my position is that we should fund our own salaries as elected officials out of the ongoing operation support, and $1,500 a month was the amount that is supported by the ongoing operation report. If there are additional revenues that support a higher fee, well, then that would make more sense to me, but recurring costs should be matched with recurring revenues. Does anyone else agree with that or disagree with that?
I disagree. I'll take a vote, but whatever y'all decide, but I totally disagree with that. We have, you want to comment on that here? We have enough money to support it at least for another year.
So we're passing a budget. We have no long-term, obviously the fixed fee for the board will continue to come in as per the contract at quarterly installments of the 250 plus inflation, whatever that is going forward. So in that obviously is our revenue going forward. We're passing a budget for 1 year. We don't have any long-term plans beyond that. So if we do not have the funds next year, obviously we can adjust the budget at that point. At this point, we have money in the reserve funds to fund the budget as it is today.
Commissioner Hanna has a comment.
Okay, Commissioner Hannah, go ahead.
Sorry, guys, the mute thing. Anyway, I was agreeing with Miriam with the salaries. I mean, I've said it in the past about bringing it down to the $1,500 mark. I truly believe the only one really, I mean, other than Danny, who's functioning 24/7 in different roles, but I agree with Miriam about bringing it down to control the budget the way it stands.
Commissioner Franklin, you have a comment?
I think we should leave our salaries as they are and put out we have to budget for 2022. And all the budgets that we're not taking tax money, we're taking all of our budget money comes from worldwide government. So I think we should leave the budget, the salaries at 2,000.
All right. I'm going to take a vote. Would you do a roll call, please, on reducing the salaries?
Commissioner Hill,
We're voting to reduce the salaries to 1,500.
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanna,
I vote yes to reduce the salary.
Commissioner Franklin,
How about no reduce the salaries?
Vice Chairman Cole,
I vote no to reduce the salary.
Chairman Forward.
No. All right, motion fails. The salary will remain the same for another year.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd almost like to make a motion that we stop bringing this up at every meeting.
It's not going to be discussed.
It's now been voted on. We don't need to bring it up at every meeting.
It's not going to be discussed anymore this year.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. All right, the next thing on the agenda and for the budget, anything else?
So I have one more point, unless someone else wants to break in.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go
Right.
ahead.
So
What you want
on
to
the
talk
audit, which is on the operations, and this kind of dovetails with some of the public requests that we've had about reconciling our accounts with Worldwide's accounts, since they reference each other. Our public statements, our public budget references payables from Worldwide. So we're getting a receivable, they should have a payable. And then they have public documents on Emma that show amounts that don't necessarily match up to items on our budget. I know we're the issuer of a conduit bond and that may have implications there, but do we need to budget for a third-party auditor to reconcile the two audits so that we understand whether they make sense? Is that our obligation as a conduit bond issuer to make sure that they track?
Here, I'll let you comment.
So the entities are two separate and distinct audits. The only way to reconcile them would be to ask the auditors of the two separate companies, which are not, again, I've never seen it done. There could be other factors within Worldwide. Again, the auditors that audit Worldwide stand behind their financial statements that say whatever they say. We have no part in that. If the only part that we would play potentially is if the auditors decided to send us, and I mean, those not the board authority, a verification of any amounts due. Just like you get every now and then from your bank, you get a question, do you have this amount of money in the bank? That would be the only participation that we would ever have in an audit. I don't know, I don't think it could be done. And obviously it's something we have to discuss with the auditors. I've never seen it. I don't know that, again, and this is again, I've just never seen it. So, and I don't know, reconciling between two separate independent companies, you're comparing apples and oranges. They have their accounting policies and procedures, and we have our accounting policies and procedures. The auditors that audit their books stand behind the statements are accurate to their investors and to whoever those go to. We have no part to play in that. And so with reconciliation, I'm not sure what you would do with that anyway. There's no formal report that any auditor would ever issue to provide you with any assurance that those records reconcile again. So.
Would you check with our auditors and see if there's anything there and that could possibly be done and report back to us? Otherwise, that's a moot point at the moment. Okay, anything else? All right, I got something. Let's go down to Customs House, the cleaning service. The people that are presently doing the cleaning service are not getting the job done. And Customs and Border has asked us to do something about that. I have requested another company to come in and look at that. They did. They have given us a much lower bid, well, not much lower, but a lower bid for cleaning Customs House once a week. They started out with twice a week. And I asked Customs and Border if they would consent to once a week, and he said, yes, that's really all we need. So we're going to do that, and we're going to put that in the budget, and I'll have final figures for you at the next meeting. And we can approve that, but that's where we are with the cleaning service.
Pretty Customs and Borders, have a complaint about the cleaning service. This is the first I've heard about that.
Well, the cleaning service is not showing up to do the job. That's the problem. They haven't been there in 3 months.
They haven't been there in 3 months.
No,
But they should have notified me before this. I mean, and they had my phone number and all my information there.
well, they notified me, Carol, and Commissioner Franklin, and I put out a request for someone else that notified us that they had a cleaning service. So we're going to be changing. because the ones that are there now are not doing the job.
Well, if they hadn't been there 3 months, I said they quit. Have we paid them for the last 3 months?
Yes, we have.
Well, they should have notified us just before, they should have notified us to stop paying them. But okay.
Okay. All right, anything else? All right, can we approve the budget? Or you want to wait till the next meeting?
You need to, it needs to be amended. You're gonna need a version 4 or whatever based on adding the line item. You need info from.
Right,
cleaning
I'll get
service.
that.
So your final approval will be
I've
on
got
that
it,
page.
let me bring it up.
And we're on schedule, so obviously the plan was to approve it. It's gonna be,
Yes, okay,
we'll
good.
Approve the final version.
We'll do that. All right, very good. So the budget's done. Okay, next thing on the agenda would be the annual audit engagement letter. Yeah,
So you have, in your package, you have there's two in the letter. One is for there's a requirement, obviously, from the Florida Auditor General that the investment accounts, what we invest our funds in, be audited. And so the first letter is that's section 218 for 15 of the Florida statutes. There's a whole engagement letter just about that. And again, that's required by Florida statute. And so there's no additional fee for that. It's included in the audit fee. And then the second letter is the standard engagement letter that we sign each year. It's essentially all the same terms and conditions of this is the normal audit engagement letter. So that I didn't see there's nothing unusual or outstanding or different from any previous years. It's lengthy, it's 7 pages. But it's essentially more, kind of a standard terms and conditions of an audit and what their work does and what it does not do, obviously. And obviously the fee is found on page 8. So the fee is $25,800. They'll be here in November to do the audit. There's also on page 8 is the potentially an additional fee for $4,000 for each of the federal and state programs. So obviously we have the cranes this year and the warehouse and the docks, I think. So there's at least 3 programs that will need to be audited. Those are essentially what we call the yellow book audit, which just essentially says that the terms of the grant were followed. That's required by the federal grant, because we receive federal grants in amount above a certain amount. Those have to be audited, and they have to be audited individually. So each grant is audited. And so there's an additional fee for that. In past years, that fee has been paid by the operator. So that's why it's not included in the budget. Because those go specifically with those grants. So we just need to approve and sign these and return them to the auditor, so we can get on their schedule for November to get the audited financials for the year. This is for the year ended September 30th, 2021.
I don't see the engagement letter. The engagement letter on here is in.
Yes, sir.
It's right after, so there's 2 letters. The first one from Malcolm Jenkins is 3 pages long, and the second one is 8 pages long.
That was attached to our.
Yeah, it's in
In
the
the
package.
packet.
Not.
And it was the last one's package, and I think it was in this special meeting package.
Mhm.
Like I said, both letters are one right after the other. The first one's 3 pages, the second one's 8.
Is this the last year of our contract with them?
I will have to look. I'm not sure. I think we had a 3-year agreement.
Let's see.
But I'll have to look.
Were they the auditor before that 3-year period? Is it a renewal or?
No, before that was the auditors who were auditing Worldwide Terminal. Carr, Riggs and Ingram was, which had been, we took over the firm that was doing, so we had the same auditor for about 12 years before that. And they took over the firm out of Jacksonville, I'm sorry, out of Gainesville, that then was taken over by Carr, Riggs and Ingram. So,
How frequently should you change auditors?
there's no specific requirement to change.
I've had really good service with them, being able to get on the phone with Wade.
Right.
Anytime I had a question, he's more than generous with his time.
And the only reason we switched away from Carr, Riggs and Ingram is because we weren't getting that level of service. So we were having trouble getting on the schedule. They were showing up late. We were turning in the audit late. Carl, Malden and Jenkins, the auditors now, they come in November. It's done essentially by January, February, the audit's done. Whereas Malden, Carr, Riggs and Ingram used to take, and a lot of it was because, again, they'd just been acquired by a larger firm. There's lots of changes going on. And so, at that point, I'm sure you get great service now. But yeah, we felt a little neglected by them. And so we've got Malden and Jenkins, yes.
And we put that out for bid when we did that.
Yeah.
And they were the lowest price and gave us the best deal.
Right.
Service. And we've been very happy with them. And I don't see any reason to change this year.
Right.
We're still under contract with them, and next year we'll look at that again.
I'll just say, you need to have an auditor in place by September 30th, which means that if you want to have a bidding process, if you want to open it up for bidding and open it up for request, we have to start in February, March.
Yeah.
So just, we'll look and see if this is the last year for the Malden Jenkins contract.
Almost certain it is, but
Well, so for some reason, I was thinking maybe 5 years. But with 2-year renewal, two renewal options, but
okay.
for some reason I have that in mind, but that may be someone else. So I'll have to look and see, but obviously if we want to do that, just realize, like I said, it is a little bit of a cumbersome process that we have to start in February, March at the latest.
Okay. Keep reminding us of that. All right, any other questions about that? All right, all in favor of reviewing or signing the engagement letter?
Yeah.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, we'll get that done. Okay, memorandum of understanding with the city of Fernandina Beach on the sewer line. Patrick?
Yeah, we've discussed this,
Right.
before. We've added it to this particular special meeting because the city project is supposed to be started at the beginning of September. So this is for them to replace the sewer line running into the port. The agreement is that we will let them do the work and pay for it, which is going to be over $7,700 estimated. And then Opal will acknowledge the abandonment of the North Front Street right of way that they did actually some time ago. We will have the sewer line work inspected by an engineer of our own hiring, and we'll be responsible for it going forward. So no real term change from what we've discussed a couple of times. This is just for you to approve the MOU, and we'll get it signed by Chairman Fullwood and myself, and then give it to the city for them to sign. And we'll get started.
Any questions about the memorandum?
Did they send our changes?
Yeah. Yeah, we had some minor changes regarding some continuity language, other things, and those were acceptable to Danny Bach, so they're ready to move forward.
I don't see any reason why we shouldn't sign this. Any questions? All in favor, say aye. Scott?
He's nodding his head.
I'm trying. Aye. Sorry, guys, it wouldn't unmute.
All right. All opposed, no? All right, motion carries. All right, we'll do that. All right, now, Fstead Grant GOL06. Chris, you want to speak about that for a second?
Sure. We have been reviewing this grant with FDOT and our engineers, and we developed a plan rather than rushing to expend this by the end of the year when it expires. FDOT's agreeable that we request from FSTED to transfer the remaining balance. We have about $75,000 of billing against this grant, which right now sits at $195,402. So we're going to close out any invoicing against this grant as it sits by September 30th and request that the balance be transferred to G1938. G1938 has a similar scope, which relates to pier rehab and maintenance dredging, and it still has 3 years to go. And from our work on this grant and reviewing it, this grant was inherited from Kinder Morgan, requested by us. So we did some exploratory work and we did a bid process to see what the cost of the repairs would be. And it came out that it was not a feasible scope of work and not a feasible cost. It was well over $1 million. And it wasn't supposed to be that. So if you look at the scope of GOL06, it relates to the dock, the red box. So the logical adjustment project scope of GOL06, design, procurement, rehabilitation of North Dock ramp and pilings as needed on the existing 1,200-foot linear feet of dock and port front. So it really was always planned to work together with 1938, and we decided that it's more efficient to combine the projects. We will be building some design work, as I said, against it of approximately $75,000 left over for trans systems. And I will be prepared to be pleased to draft a letter for Vice Chairman Cole on OPA letterhead for him to sign, or for the chairman to sign and carry it and present it at the FSTED meeting in Panama City. And I've also spoken to Mike Rubin, and he assures me that he would be pleased to present it, and he doesn't expect any opposition.
Well, he's leaving tomorrow, so.
Okay, yeah, we'll send it to him this afternoon. I could even put it on OPA's letterhead, and then you can just print it out and sign it. And I'll copy Chairman Forward and anybody else that wants to see it.
Yeah, and I'm meeting with FDOT the other day. They were going to check to make sure this can be transferred to another.
Right, which I spoke to them this morning,
Okay,
Kyle Kaufman and Justin Ryan, and they agree it's not a problem.
okay, good.
In fact, they support it.
All right, very good. All right. Okay, let's move on to the Reynolds Smith and Hill scope of work. Gentlemen. Good afternoon. Welcome. Want to talk to us about that for a minute? What we've done is we're going to use the I call them COVID relief funds. There's another name for it. I can keep that in my head. To if we need to supplement that particular grant with those funds, we can do that. It's already been approved. Oh, we've already got permission. We can do that. Okay. We can do that. Patrick, do you have any information on us about that grant at this time?
I don't have anything new from submitting the resolution to them. I know that there was a information session or meeting. So I'm happy to reach out to them on timing. I think at the staff level, it's not entirely in their control as to when everything gets approved, and that they were expecting it to be pretty quick.
And do we have anything we need to send them asking for money for particular items included in that grant?
No, I think it works like a traditional one where you would seek funding. It's my recollection from the conversation with them, it's kind of split up between items you've already spent money on from, I think, March going forward, and then items you're going to spend money on. So you just have to provide them either reimbursement documentation or, invoices for things that you expect to happen.
And this money will be for the grant. This particular grant will be in next year's budget. We'll put it back in next year's budget. And kept the levels the same before we had them reduce everything. Because we need those public workshops in there. So I think everybody agrees with that. We wanted that put back in, so it raises the cost of it back up to the original cost they told us.
So if I could.
Yeah.
So, as Patrick said, so this is a traditional grant, works like every other FDOT grant, which means that you have to spend the money and then submit receipts and things for reimbursement. We can go back to spending for March 3rd. So obviously, and the idea here is this is the economic recovery. And so to spend it, and so it's back to March 3rd and 90 days forward. There are reporting requirements with this grant, and there are narrative requirements that need to be reported. So not sure who is going to prepare the narratives with regards to the funds being submitted for reimbursement. But obviously, we can easily gather the receipts. Once we have the funds, we can use those to pay additional funds if we needed to, obviously. So, but someone's going to have to write the narrative as to, again, this grant is specifically for response to the negative economic impacts of the COVID-19 public health emergency by stabilizing the subrecipient and provide working capital to lay the foundation for a strong economic recovery. So someone has to write a narrative to that effect of how this spending drives home that point.
Why would we use that funding for the local match when the local match was committed by Worldwide for the strategic master plan, which relates to the Port of Fernandina?
Well, the local match was agreed to a certain point. There's a FDOT match and a local match. And the grant was submitted or came back to us at $70,000, $80,000 over the local match. Chris,
The local match, the grant is 118 on a 50/50 match, but Worldwide is not committed to funding the local share on this particular project.
I thought you were at one time.
Well, we're not committed to it, and in fact, we can't use bond capital improvement money since determined for a business study or business plan. So I think you're on the right track with the COVID relief.
So we got to pay the whole 190.
Match. So we have 118, depending on the price you negotiate, then you have to match the 118 at least, but if you have to go higher, then you might have to put some additional in.
So, but you're gonna do the match? Was that? I thought you said you would do that.
Well, we talked about the possibility of it, but we haven't, there's no paperwork yet on the match. We're not able to do that.
So the strategic master plan requires T funds or any other federal grants, like we have to have this plan done. And that, looking at the CSIP grant, looking in CSIP, the grant application that was submitted by Mr. Rubucci includes the scope of work and the qualifications of our state in lieu of our strategic master plan required exhibit to be attached. Reference this so that he could an RFP meetings.
And furthermore, I don't know what's so extraordinary. We made in the 5 years legally. Furthermore, the statement that none of these grants will roll without an update is patently false. It's incorrect.
Who applied for this grant for the master plan?
Well, your previous board director actually applied for it, Mr. Bell, about 2.5 years ago. You had this, I'll give you, I just happen to have the grant information. I'll give you the date this grant was approved. It's at least 3 cycles ago. We gave up trying to push it and move it forward because at this point, it's really Oprah's call. We were hoping to get it done in the spring. If you remember, we were pitching it back in February and March. Let's see.
I'd like to make a motion to request that Mr. Kachowski prepare a demand letter that the matching funds be provided, given that in reliance on Mr. Gucci's comments at public meetings in support of this application and consideration of his work on this application, and drafting of documents on this application and this response to request for qualifications, that we demand payment of that local match that was committed multiple times by Worldwide.
Okay, there's been a motion to ask Worldwide to pay for the local share of the grant for the master plan. Any discussion?
I'm with Miriam. I thought Chris was covering the local grant. That's why we tried to pull back some of the costs. So we kept it at a certain limit that they wanted to cover. But now they're saying they're not covering any of it. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what we're hearing.
Yeah, that definitely isn't what was discussed at the meetings, Chris. I mean, we can go back to the minutes and pull it out and pull it into the next meeting. But you definitely said you were covering the local grant over and over, bud.
And I have a sheet here that says master plan inactivity has been 10 months.
Yeah, there's a grant portfolio age profile in one of the reports that we get, Chairman Forward, and it's going on 2 years since it was actually signed. It was approved 3 years ago by the time the grant agreement gets signed. So there it is. That's what it is.
I've actually asked multiple times whenever we discuss grants that we get some type of written commitment for the local match for this exact reason, because we engage with third-party contractors who spend a significant amount of time in reliance on our RFQ, which I know that we don't have a legal obligation to award it all. I understand that we can get through the whole process and we can award to no one. But it's so disingenuous on our part to do that when, you know, the reason that we're not going to proceed is because of an issue like this. So I think we should have a practice of getting commitment. Otherwise, we can't plan. And we're not going to get bids in the future when we try to go through this process if the bidder knows that ultimately either their work won't be approved or their bills won't be paid.
Your opinion, Patrick?
We've got a motion on the floor, so really the discussion should be amongst yourselves. Yeah, I haven't looked at this particular issue. I recall discussion about payment of the local match, but I have to look at the minutes, and I'm happy to do whatever you direct me to do.
You want to wait and go back and look at the minutes and make sure we're staying on firm ground?
Yeah, I would like to ask Patrick to prepare the letter.
So I was just, in Worldwide's defense, not to, again, is that they have matched $3.5 million already. You've acquired $10 million of equipment in the last 3 years, of which $3.5 million has been funds directly to the Ocean Island Port Authority from Worldwide.
We have $21 million worth of conduit bonds that have been issued. You have, what, $8 million worth of federal and state grant money that's I mean, do well.
That's a wrong figure. It's less than 4 million
All
outside.
right, I'm gonna,
No accuracy.
I want to table this and,
We have a motion on the floor. So the motion either
all right,
needs to,
there's a motion on the floor to ask Patrick to, what was it again?
I was requesting that he just write a demand letter, which is a letter stating that the Ocean Island Port Authority is demanding payment of the local match. And again, and one more thing, since we're in the discussion phase of this. When we were discussing the scope of work, we had several points within the project, as you'll recall, that were just for OPA. So west side of Nassau, Crawford Diamond, projects that would really be OPA's strategic master plan. And Mr. Ragucci said he would not support any award that was for a Crawford Diamond project that would connect Crawford Diamond to Jacksport. That he would only support the scope of work that was for the
For the port. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to remind you all that.
Absolutely. When we made amends that we would take things out because Chris was having a bird about covering other things. It was 100% what we discussed. So we definitely need to go through the minutes, Chris, because it was 100% put out that way that you would only cover if we kept it mainly regulated to the port. And that's what was agreed upon.
Well, look, this is your master plan, so you're adjusting the scope as you see fit. We only gave our opinion as to what it should cover. But the bottom line is, there's no issue here, since the COVID relief money clearly is available for local matches against state grants. You've got $806,000 to work with. Whatever you decide to spend on your master plan update, which is again, essentially a voluntary update, not legally required at this time, we would encourage you to just put all those things back in the master plan and you have funding to pay for. So I don't see what the big issue is.
Mr. Franklin, you have any comment?
Well, several months ago, Wes said the world about that do all the mentions of our grants, all the grants. He didn't, I don't remember naming any of them out, you know, and he should be, worldwide should be obligated to match all of our grants.
All right, well, we'll vote on this motion and ask Patrick to do that if it passes. And Worldwide can respond to that in whatever manner they please. So all in favor signify by saying aye. No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you going to research?
Yes.
The verb, okay, then I'm okay.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carried. All right. All right,
So before we leave,
yes,
we ready to leave that topic? Obviously, what we were talking about was the ARPA grant, the ARPA $806,000,
yes,
and how we're going to spend that money
yes.
and who. So obviously, even if we take all the costs of the Ocean Island Port Authority as it occurred from March 3rd and 90 days forward, that will equal approximately $200,000. The ARPA grant needs to be spent. It cannot be reserved. It cannot stay in the account for, again, there's no, the grant sheet does not specify, but obviously there's 90-day reports due on progress on moving forward. So obviously, again, this money needs, or we'll go back to the state.
Does this money have to be spent all in that 8 months?
It does not need to be so. So the grant allows you to go back to March 3rd to claim all costs from March 3rd going forward. And then allows you to claim 90 days of costs going forward. Okay, and it asks you to, this is the point I was making, it asks you to define what the economic recovery, the purpose of the grant and how what you're doing helps propel them. Okay. Again, money cannot be put in reserves. That's very specific in there. It can be used for state matching grants. It can't be used for federal matching grants. Even if we use it for, again, for the Ocean Island Port Authority, unless we have projects ready to go to be spent to, again, to speed up the economic recovery, So I need some guidance from the board of how you're gonna spend that money. We have $800,000 sitting in the bank that we can have, yes. What are we gonna spend it on?
One of the things we keep talking about is not having the funding for a board director, someone who is our CEO. And I would be happy to write up the verbiage to get with Rosanna. And the two of us could prepare, craft the verbiage and then present it at the next meeting for the board.
So I'll just say to that, obviously, there's no guarantee that the money will be available. It does require quarterly, the sheets have put out, and I need to read it a little bit more carefully if you want, because I did think about board director, obviously. The problem is obviously that there's no guarantee that the money will stay there, that, what, in other words, again, yes, could you craft something? But again, this money is not supposed to be put in reserves, which means that in theory, no, you cannot reserve a board director's salary for a year ahead or whatever. Again, my reading, we need to read it more carefully if that's your intention to do that. So these are projects to be put in the ground or whatever, or again, and going back to assist the economic recovery. Again, that's what the grant says. Again, we need to prepare narratives how our spending is going to drive that. As I said, putting in it specifically disallows creation of reserves, which means that we cannot take, by my definition of that means that we cannot take 200,000 of that and put it into a salary for 2 years from now. Yes, could you fund 6 months of a board director's salary? Yes. Could you fund 2 years worth? I don't believe so. Again, that's my simple reading of the grant right now.
We need to find out more information because I don't agree with that,
With what?
with what you just said.
Okay.
But but we'll have to look at it. I'll have to read more about it.
Okay.
There's still a lot of it. Even when you talk to they couldn't tell us exactly what the parameters are. So
Yeah, I asked them a few questions and they had to get back to me. I do
Yeah.
recall them saying that salaries for OPA employees or OPA related services, so that would be
right,
Pierre's fees, my fees, the auditor's fees,
right,
Rosanna's salary,
Right.
yours. They did not think paying salaries or bonuses or anything to worldwide employees qualify because
they're not on
bodies
board.
for open. We talked about the master plan, those type of things, but I would just encourage you to go back to them. Because when I asked them a couple of different questions, they said, we got to get back to you after this. And they did, they got back to me pretty quick. But, and I'm happy to help with any narratives that need to be written. I'm sure that they will also help us with that.
So,
I've got those rules right here and I've read them several times. So.
well, and so obviously to apply for so the question is who's going to apply for reimbursement and when. Obviously, along with that needs to go a report requesting funds and plans for funds. So I need direction on if Patrick's going to do that, fine. But if I need direction, if you want of what you're saying, if you're telling me, yes, the grant allows, we can hire a fourth director, and we can 2 years from now spend from this money, we'll put that in the plan. Okay. But so I just need direction on, what you want those financials to look like. Like I said, we know definitively we spent from March 3rd to now how much we spent, and we know what we'll spend in the next 90 days.
Let me read this to you. Says, how much can we invoice? First invoice, up to 50% of the allocated amount. Cost incurred from March 3rd, 2021 through the date of spending plan transmittal. Cost for 90 days working capital measured from date of spending plan transmittal. Cost included in approved spending plan. Subsequent invoices. If 90-day spending plan is achieved, up to 50%. Any cost that exceeds the approved 90-day spending plan amount, or the cost for 90 days working capital measured from date of spending plan transmittal. subsequent invoices if 90-day spending plan is not achieved. Cost reimbursement for eligible costs. That's the only direction it gives.
So all those reimbursements, you can invoice up to 50% of the grant, which is $400,000. You have to support that reimbursement with actual paid receipts. Your expenses over that period will be $150,000 at most. So you cannot get the rest of the money for the grant. That $250,000, you do not have receipts to show to get that. You could, yes, you could invoice up to 50% of the grant, absolutely. We do not have $400,000 of receipts of spending for the last 6 months or since March 3rd, and we will not even hire the court director.
Yeah, I don't think you have to use all of it in 90 days. I just don't read it that way. I could be wrong. You're smarter about these things than I am, but I just don't.
I don't think you have to use it in 90 days from now. I don't even know that you have to use it in 180 days from now.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you can use it a year and a half from now.
Well, that's what we need to find out.
Okay. So I think, yes, if you have plans in place and they're moving forward and you're spending, yes. I would disagree that you can use it 18 months to 24 months from now to fund operations.
Well, and I think it's probably good for us to have an attitude of coming up with ideas for, where we should spend it and bringing those back to the meeting, maybe along with some of the, the start of the verbiage. But we've always had an issue with cash constraints, right? And everything we've tried to do, from internships to customs house, everything we've tried to do, we always seem to have a cash constraint. So if we try to look forward with those same needs, and I know we've talked about the intern issue, and that's a very small piece, but those would be the types of things where if there's a training program for college students, if there's some sort of outreach, if there's something with the customs house, like having an administrative office there.
And you're right, I have no idea. So something, even in the port director, let's look at the port director. Okay, putting an RFP out, getting it, how long do you think it's going to take to hire that port director? Let's say 3 months to have someone in place. So you put that into your 90-day spending plan, that's your plan. Again, how long do you have to report every 90 days that you're continuing to spend those funds? Fine. How long can that go on? The grant is not clear, I'll give you that. Okay. But the grant is about speeding economic recovery. So I don't know that, because even customs house or internships, again, these are not things that we have in place. These are things that to get going, to get these, to get an intern in here again. And no, the grant does not specify how they're going to approve or disapprove or what they're going to allow after the 90-day period. They do require 90-day reporting though. That's for sure.
All right. I also have one of the pages in this packet says reporting. Sub-recipients will have to report how program funds are used to respond to negative economic impacts and lay the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery. Table 12, quarterly report periods and due dates. It goes report 1, grant start date to 9/30. It has to be due date is 10/15. Goes all the way down to report 14, dated 2024.
I saw that, yes.
Fourth quarter. And that doesn't have to be reported until 1/15/2025. So we can do these covered periods for whatever we need. And then subsequently do whatever other things we need, like next year's budget. We'll have money left over that we can obtain from them.
So there's
We
two.
don't have to have it in an account somewhere for us.
Right.
But we just have to show them where we're going to spend it and what we're going to spend it on.
So if you flip to several pages back, right, the first line says you cannot use this to fund reserves.
To fund
So the
reserve.
question-
We're not
right.
putting it in a reserve.
That's what I understand. That's those two things are inconsistent here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I understand. I saw the chart. I agree. It goes to 2024. Can you fund your budget through 2024? But on the other side, it says you cannot use it to fund reserve. How are those two?
How does that conflict with each other?
Those two, as far as an accountant, are somewhat incompatible, right?
Yeah.
If I hire someone and I say I'm going to use this for their salary for the next 24, 36 months, have I set up a
We have to
reserve?
go from budget to budget. We have to go from budget to budget. For the next,
No, the accountants are not going to look at it, so the auditor is not going to look at it that way. If you tell the auditor that you've hired a port director, you're using this grant funds for 36 months, they're going to put 36 months into a reserve account. That's how you're funding it. That's the incompatibility of these two. I can't answer you. I've read the documents you sent me. I've read the actual grant.
they're a bit confusing, but
I will just say, we need to,
I'm hoping that when he goes to the meeting for FSTAD and Florida Force Council, they'll be able to answer some of the questions.
I will say, to avoid trouble, spend it sooner rather than later.
Yes,
The longer it drags on, the more questions there are.
we hired a port director, use some of these funds for the port director for this year. And then next year we come back and say, you know, we need more money for the port director this coming year. And we should be able to get that according to what I'm reading, correct? You don't know?
That's, again, you're hiring a new headcount. Those two statements, as I just said, are incompatible. You're setting up a reserve as far as I'm concerned for that salary.
We're doing on a one-year contract each year.
Yeah, but then there's no guarantee that the money will be there next year.
Well, then we'll fire him.
Right, well, yeah, and that's fine. There's no, what I'm telling you is that without setting up a reserve, there's no guarantee that money will be there. There's no guarantee that grant will be there. They're requiring reporting, but again, will they come down and say, this grant is over, you haven't spent it, we're gonna suck it back into
Okay, well, that's something we need to find
the
out.
big vacuum in the sky.
I'm gonna stop talking about that.
What percentage do grant administrators usually get? Do grant administrators work on a percentage?
What would we need a grant administrator for?
Well, it seems like that would be helpful for both, conduit bond and for this, and for MARAD and just for all these various things we do. I guess the conduit bond.
Oh, you're talking about hiring a grant
We have a
administrator
trustee.
to do all the bond.
Right.
So I'm not sure what you mean by the conduit bond.
Let's take that one out because we have a
Yeah.
trustee. So,
And again, the Ocean Highway Port Group has no responsibility whatsoever.
let's take
for
that one out. Let's talk about the MARAD grant, or let's talk about these other grants that we apply for. And when you say we need verbiage, that's the type of thing that the grant administrator will do. And then also, certifying compliance with the grant over time to help us make sure that we stay in compliance.
So only one organization have so I'll just throw out, so it was 6% of the amount of the grant. Because you're talking about hiring someone on a contract basis.
Right.
Because we don't have a salary to pay that person, we don't have enough grants to fund their job full time. Again, that was several years ago. That was one organization here in the county that I know hired a grant administrator. That was the cost at that point. But it's finding somebody right now would be the key challenge, would be finding someone to do that.
Thank you for staying honest.
Obviously, we need to take advantage of this money. We've received, this is economic recovery funds have been made available to us, because of this whole COVID situation. So how do we best take advantage of that? How do we make sure we receive the full? We have $800,000 available for us. There's no doubt about it. How do we make sure we receive that full value, that we capture the value of this grant? Obviously, that we spend it smartly.
All right, any other questions about that? All right, do we need to hear from Rome Smith and Hill at this point? Or are we just gonna put this back in our budget and request the funds for that from the relief funds?
So actually, so the funds do allow And again, at this point, we have plenty of release funds. So yes, they allow for funding of state matching grants. So you can use the
Yes.
relief funds for that purpose, absolutely. And it
So
absolutely.
if we end up needing to do that, then we have.
It's already been committed by a third party. And
Well,
if we budget for it and we expend it, is there any incentive for Worldwide to pay that match once they've received their strategic master grants that they can now use to attach onto the grants?
Well, we don't have to approve any of those things. We have to come. Put this in our budget and say, if Oakwood or if Worldwide does not support that and they're not made to pay that, whatever Patrick finds out, then we're gonna have to move forward with that or not do a master plan at all.
The strategic plan really benefits just the Port of Bernardino, which we do.
No, the one that they developed is gonna benefit OPA and the rest of the county. It's not just the port. And even if the port operator were not there, whoever runs that port is gonna benefit from that, yes. The port's gonna benefit from
But for example, like the Crawford Diamond projects, those were carved out.
it. No, they're gonna be built back in.
Yeah, we should put all that stuff back in, guys.
Yeah, that's-
Not for nothing.
Is that right, Justin?
That would be included in the full,
Yes, that's
the
the
original scope.
right, the original scope of work. It's all
And
been,
impacted the price as well, right?
yeah, that's what
So
we've
it's,
been
so
talking
now
about.
it's further increasing.
No, well, back to the original.
Yeah, the original price.
I mean, we took out some items to bring it down. I mean, we put it back in, go back to that original cost.
So can we make sure all that stuff's in there with the Crawford Diamond and the West Side and everything?
Yes,
Yeah. And then
we're gonna approve, well, hopefully we're gonna approve the scope of work today. We can do that, right? Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, I'm not in support of doing that because I think
Well,
that shifts the incentives. So how do you simultaneously say we can get a payment, but we're also going to pay?
they're not gonna pay it. Then what are we doing here?
we don't have to pay everything right away. Is that correct? Justin, would you explain how all this payment deal will work? It's only incremental, right, as you do the work?
Right, we invoice on a monthly basis.
Right.
The work completed for that month. If we use our standard client agreement, it's with 30-day payment terms. So we bill at the end of the month for the work we complete, you have 30 days to pay that. That's invoice.
So Patrick's gonna let us know by next meeting. So we either gotta go one way or the other here. We've got to put it in our budget to fund that in case we can't get Worldwide to pay it. Otherwise, we don't do one.
We all walked into this meeting today, not intending to fund this match.
No, we didn't either. No. No, we talked about that at the last meeting. They were there at the last meeting. We talked about putting everything back in the budget because we had the funds to pay for it if we needed it. That's exactly what we talked about at the last meeting. That's why they're here today, to approve the scope of work. All right. Where we going here? What's next? I lost. All right, so what we need to do is approve the Reynolds Smith and Hill scope of work. Any discussion about that? Let's get a motion. Somebody,
I'll make a motion that we approve their scope of work.
got a motion to approve the scope of work for Reynolds Smith and Hill. Any discussion? Further discussion?
I guess my question is that we're definitely all on the same page, that all the stuff we had talked about in the beginning with the West Side and all the Crawford Diamond and everything, we're going to be putting this all back in, right? This is going to be the big budget item is going to be with everything that we had originally voiced that we wanted. So we're going to go with getting the grant money to cover this whole thing as a whole.
That's
And-
correct.
Correct. Okay. I second that motion. As long as we're covering everything as a whole. I don't want to leave anything out that we, as a party, decided that we thought were important. We pulled stuff out to work with Chris, and now he's backing out. So,
Because we talked about it last meeting about community involvement. We definitely
Yeah.
want the community involved. And having those meetings is important.
I agree. I think we should have the
That's why
community
we
involved,
put
the
all
West
that
Side.
back in there.
Yeah, let's get it all back in then. Okay. I'm in for that then.
That's correct, isn't it?
Right,
Justin?
that's great. I just recommend as part of your motion, you differentiate that it's the June 17th scope of work. That was the original. We changed the date for the updated. So if you want to go back to the original, I would just make sure you differentiate.
You want to amend
Yes,
this?
I'll amend that motion that we go back to the original scope of work.
All right, motion's been made that we go back to the original scope of work that was put forth on June 17th. Any further discussion?
I will second that.
Okay, second. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No,
All opposed, no. You said no?
I said no.
All right, motion passes. It's done. Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir. If I can, if you
Stand
like,
up, Justin, if you don't mind.
Justin Cole, Arsenage, if you like, I can clean this up, make it, the final version. Don't change anything, let's make it clean. Send you, we have a client agreement, you got to send Patrick to review.
Yes,
And that was gonna be the next step.
okay,
We got to go with that and sign it, then we can get work.
sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else to come before this budget meeting? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.
Bye, guys.
See you, thank you.
Stay safe.
All right,